Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, June the 17th, 2024. I'm afraid I don't really find pomp and circumstance very interesting, but I do notice that there's been a lot of coverage of the trooping of the colour in the UK. So Trooping of the Colour is apparently a celebration of the King's birthday, the King's official birthday. Of course, King Charles III, his birthday he's of course a Scorpio, and his birthday is in November. But the English monarch celebrates a second birthday, which is around this time, and it just seems a bit strange. And there is this ceremony, the Trooping of the Colour. I've always heard of the Trooping of the Colour. I didn't really know what it was. I sort of looked it up, and it is to do with the King's birthday. But the point about this Trooping of the Colour, it was that it was the first time in which Princess Catherine has been involved in some public engagement. So she sort of disappeared the beginning of the year, and there have all been sort of rumours and her hospital visits and the fact that she was diagnosed with cancer, and she was resting and so forth. But now she's had this sort of official engagement with the Trooping of the Colour, and so I suppose there might be some interest in what is going on in terms of this official engagement. And I have looked at Catherine's chart before, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to have another look at her chart. And I kind of wanted to look at her chart with a fair amount of isolation. It's Prince William's birthday in a few days' time. I didn't really want to talk about Prince William right now because I'm going to talk about him very soon. So I wanted to really just focus on her. I mean, I might talk about her father-in-law, King Charles, a bit, but really it's what's happening to her. For example, what about her last lunar return, when the moon returned to where it was when she was born, just before the Trooping of the Colour. So I thought that might be something worth doing. I'm not saying that I'm going to uncover anything fantastic or horrific here. I'm just looking at her charts, seeing if I can see anything. I also need to point out that it is a really busy day astrologically. There is really tons of stuff going on, and so I think I need to get going on this and sort of describe everything that's happening. We've got 2 sign changes, as I'm about to tell you. So let's start off by looking at what is going to happen today, or what is happening today, which is Monday, June the 17th, 2024. So here is the chart for today. Well, in fact, that's not the chart for today. That is the chart of Princess Catherine. What we want to really talk about is the chart of today, which is Monday, June the 17th, 2024. And there are 2 sign changes, and that's excluding the moon. We have got Mercury and Venus both switching signs from Gemini into Cancer. So we've had this big build-up in Gemini. We had 4 planets in Gemini: Sun, Jupiter, Mercury and Venus. In fact, at one point we had the moon in Gemini as well. We had 5 planets in Gemini. And that build-up in Gemini is now starting to break up in a big way, because today 2 of those Gemini planets have moved on and they're now in Cancer. And indeed, in a few days' time, the Sun is going to leave Gemini as well. And so we're going to have 3 planets in Cancer. So the shift from Gemini to Cancer, it's quite major. I mean, Gemini is an air sign. It's about conversation, communication. It's quite light. It doesn't like to be tied to any one thing, and it enjoys variety. And, Gemini is not known for its emotionality. Doesn't mean to say Geminis can't be emotional, but, you've had Mercury in Gemini, which has a reputation for talking a lot, got lots to say. Boris Johnson, he's got Mercury in Gemini. He's always got something to say, even when he's not Prime Minister. And Venus in Gemini, enjoying social variety. Perhaps with Venus in Gemini, we don't want to spend too much time in the company of any one person. And then we get the shift into Cancer. Now, Cancer is a mute sign. And traditionally, it was called a mute sign because the ruler of Cancer, or rather the animal associated with Cancer, is a crab. And likewise, the water sign has a fish as it's associated with it, and the Scorpio has a scorpion associated with it, obviously. And so these three animals, the crab, the fish, and the scorpion, they don't make much noise. And so that's why Cancer is called a mute sign. It just doesn't make as much noise as a Gemini, because maybe Cancer is more concerned with feeling rather than thinking and talking. And so with Mercury in Cancer, there's perhaps less to be said, but there's more to be felt. Though I should say, just because you've got Mercury in Cancer doesn't mean that you've got nothing to say. I mean, look at Donald Trump. He's got Mercury in Cancer. I think that needs some consideration, but in his case, I think that in many respects, Donald Trump communicates through his moon in Sagittarius rather than through his Mercury in Cancer. But it is a big change. Yet, it's not all about the Gemini to Cancer thing. We have got a further movement away from the air signs, and this is the moon moving out of Libra into Scorpio. Again, Libra, Scorpio, two very different signs. Libra, air sign, it sort of works in its head a bit, likes to communicate, likes to be with people, likes to keep things light. Scorpio, very different. It's quite an intense sign, is Scorpio. And the moon actually goes into Scorpio at 7:38 a.m. London time. So that means if you're in the Americas, moon is in Scorpio pretty much all day long. If you're in Europe, moon goes into Scorpio fairly early in the morning. At least by my standards, sort of 7 or 8 in the morning is pretty early. Same if you're in Africa, moon goes into Scorpio early in the morning. But if you're in Australasia, New Zealand, then it will happen. This sign change is going to be much later in the day, perhaps early evening. But still, we just get this general idea of things moving out of air signs into water signs. And while this is going on, there are a couple of aspects that need to be referred to. So Mercury, as it moves out of Gemini, it makes a square to Neptune. Mercury square Neptune. There is scope there for just getting a little bit confused. I mean, Venus is square Neptune. In fact, the Sun is starting to move towards a square of Neptune. Neptune is quite prominent in that way. Neptune is working its magic, or should I say, working its subtle, disruptive energies through. It can be disruptive. It's like the tide slowly washing things away, seeping at the foundations, and Neptune can indeed be quite a deceptive influence. But we shouldn't forget the imaginative side of Neptune. Mercury square Neptune can be imaginative, and Mercury is the way we think. Neptune is about something beyond us. So Mercury, Neptune, square Neptune, our imagination is in good form, and I think that at the same time, Mercury is making a conjunction to Venus in Cancer. Again, incredibly imaginative conjunction, this Mercury, that is Mercury conjunct Venus. We can really use our abilities, particularly our artistic abilities. So if we have got any musical abilities or literary abilities, or I don't know, perhaps we play an instrument, we can create something really quite wonderful. And we shouldn't doubt ourselves. Some of us, we may have doubts about our creativity, but all of us can be creative at some level. Even if we're not professional musicians or professional artists, there is something we can do. And I think that we can communicate our creativity, perhaps without really having to say anything. Mercury conjunct, Venus conjunct Mercury in Cancer, we just be ourselves, we absorb ourselves into whatever we're trying to create, and we just see what happens, see what kind of attention we get. Now, the moon is indeed in Scorpio, and all things being equal, this is not the best place for the moon, particularly early Scorpio. 3 degrees Scorpio is the moon's point of sort of maximum fall. And the moon is making an opposition to Mars. So moon opposition Mars, there is a possibility of real stubbornness, people not wanting to compromise, and it could turn into a bit of an argument. So work out how you're going to deal with the situation. Do you want an argument? Do you need an argument? Is there any scope for compromise? Perhaps there is scope for compromise. And it may be that the other person is not going to compromise, and it's only it's all down to you. So perhaps if you're thinking about compromise, maybe you can give something away that isn't crucial. Giving away something that's just on the fringes, that doesn't really matter, but it's still a nice gesture. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, which it's always, as I say, it's always good to look at the heliocentric solar system. Remember, this is putting the Earth on the outer edges now, and putting the Sun in the middle of the solar system. So there's the Earth at 26 Sagittarius. You can see that the Earth is making a square to Neptune. So that's the same thing as the Sun making a square to Neptune. When the Earth makes a square to Neptune, Sun makes a square to Neptune. It's all part of the same thing. And with the Earth starting to move to a square of Neptune, things aren't quite as clear as they used to be. And this is what I was saying about Neptune being so prominent at the moment. Things we take for granted, or used to take for granted, are kind of getting, they're sort of getting a bit foggy. They're sort of getting a bit hazy, and the details aren't particularly clear, and we're perhaps in danger of making a mistake here, because we just can't see the overall picture. And so with Earth making the square to Neptune, and remember, this is a heliocentric Earth square Neptune at the same time as with those geocentric aspects to Neptune, we just have to be careful, and we probably shouldn't be taking big initiatives, and we shouldn't be jumping to conclusions. So that is the heliocentric picture. Oh, I suppose on a positive note, should note that Mercury is starting to make a trine to Saturn. So Mercury trine Saturn does actually give us an opportunity to ground ourselves. There are a lot of thoughts flying around. Our imagination is very vivid, but perhaps with this heliocentric Mercury trine Saturn, we can bring some of our ideas down to Earth and not be confused by our ideas, not be chasing false leads, but perhaps understand what is really important. Now, having looked at the heliocentric picture, I want to do my forecasts for the 12 signs. I'm not quite sure how long they're going to go on for. I mean, really, there is quite a lot to talk about, but I haven't got all the time in the world, and you probably haven't got all the patience in the world. So I'll try to be relatively quick if I can. It's always a problem. But here's the geocentric chart for today, and these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for Monday, June the 17th, 2024. Aries. Over the last, week or so, things have been a little more complicated than usual. I think the problem, Aries, has been that Mars, which is your ruler, has changed sign. And, you were used to Mars being in Aries. Mars was in Aries for 6 weeks, and then it moved into Taurus, and things just became slower, more complicated. You had to perhaps think things through more, and things just didn't move as fast as they used to. And now that the moon is moving into Scorpio, it's kind of more of the same. Things are complicated, and with the moon opposition Mars, Aries, I think there may be certain things that make you annoyed. And if you're annoyed, you then have to work out, well, what is the best way of dealing with the issue? You can't really be just a typical Aries and just get angry for the sake of it, just blow off some energy, then just return to normal. And it's slower and more serious than that. Especially as the moon is actually making a square to Pluto. So the moment the moon moves into Scorpio, makes this square to Pluto, and so I think that Aries, there is scope for you to get really annoyed, but at the same time feel that you can't really express your annoyance, and that could be very frustrating. So what do you do? Well, I think, Aries, it's actually quite important to ground yourself and to focus on the things that you can control. And, with Mercury and Venus moving out of Gemini into Cancer, it's a time to be realistic, to focus on what is in your control, because some things can't be controlled. Absolutely not. You might like to control them, but it's not really worth the effort. However, there are definitely things that are within your control, especially connected with your home and your family, and perhaps other things which you're just very familiar with. And that's where you should start. And if you start to take control of the things you know and trust, the things you understand, then I think at some stage your levels of frustration will start to diminish. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, I think that you might notice that some people are changing. In particular, Venus is changing sign from Gemini into Cancer. So people are going to be perhaps more emotional than usual, and in some respects, perhaps more boring than usual. People well may not at first sight be as interesting and stimulating as they have been. And I know you want entertainment, you want action, but I don't think you should be worried about this. I think it's just that there is a more serious atmosphere now that Mercury and Venus are moving into Cancer. And I think, this may be reflected in terms of how people behave and how people respond. So if you find someone is boring or seems boring, don't panic and don't rush to judgment. Because in fact, right now, there is a case for being a little bit boring. because stability may well be important. Taurus. There's quite a lot going on astrologically. And, one thing going on at the moment is the fact that there is an opposition between the Moon and Mars across really the main axis of your solar chart. So with this opposition between the Moon and Mars, there is a danger that you get quite angry. Taurians can get angry. And it can be quite difficult when Taurians get angry. It's not like they can just let go of their energy in one blast and it all dissipates very quickly. It's one big explosion and everything calms down. It's as if nothing had happened. With Taurus, it's a slower process, and once the anger starts, it sort of builds up, and it can build up over a period of hours, days, weeks, and then it suddenly explodes. And so this is the kind of situation you may be dealing with. Just things are annoying. You don't think you can change things. You might be of a view that, when in fact, if there is any chance of changing things, it has to be done through some kind of dramatic initiative. After all, the Moon is not just making an opposition aspect to Mars, it's also making a square to Pluto. So Moon hitting Mars and Pluto, you might feel that something massive has to be done to create change. Now, maybe that's right, but you don't want to use more power than is actually necessary. And at the same time, you don't want to just build your frustrations up, and you get more and more frustrated and annoyed, and then it's all a big mess, and then you get angry, and your anger doesn't actually achieve anything, and it may end up being embarrassing. So Taurus, I do try to keep it calm. And perhaps also with Venus and Mercury moving into Cancer, particularly the Venus moving into Cancer, because Venus is your ruler. Venus has been in Gemini. It has been in Gemini, and so while Venus has been in Gemini, I suppose you've had a lot to say for yourself. But now that Venus is moving into Cancer, you perhaps need to calm down a little and perhaps be more sensitive to your emotional environment. And that doesn't mean getting annoyed about your social environment, being oversensitive. It's just about picking it up and trying to work out what is going on, and not having to respond in an over-the-top way. And as Venus moves into Cancer, Mercury does the same thing. So Mercury is moving into Cancer with Venus. And I think this conjunction between Venus and Mercury is actually pretty useful. I mean, I know that there are things annoying you, Taurus, but at the same time, there's little doubt that you are actually a very talented, imaginative person. Yeah, your imagination is on great form. And I think that you have a chance to really bring your imagination down to earth, having unusual ideas, bringing them down to earth, and then perhaps being able to communicate them, maybe using some special ability you have. For example, communicating through art or music or writing, or some way in which you can get that message across. And I think you'll do a good job, and I think people will recognize it. Of course, you've got to have some confidence. You do have artistic ability. You do have the ability to communicate in an artistic way, even if you're not an artist. So, do have confidence in yourself, and see what you can do, and see how you can, communicate in quite a lyrical and harmonious way, using whatever instruments and tools are available to you. Gemini. Well, Gemini, Mercury is moving out of your star sign or your ascendant sign, or however you're looking at doing this. However you're looking at these forecasts. I know some people look at it through the sun sign, others look at the ascendant sign, others still may look at it through the moon sign, but in general we can say that that Mercury is leaving your sign. And Mercury was well placed in Gemini, but now it's moving into Cancer. But I don't think that is a problem. I think it does create a change, but I think it makes you perhaps more serious than you have been of late. And at the same time, you can maybe appreciate other people's points of view better, because I think you're going to be more sensitive. And I mean sensitive in a way that is entirely positive. And you're going to be helped by the fact that Mercury, which is your ruler, is making a conjunction to Venus. And so, Gemini, your sensitivity is going to pay dividends. People will appreciate your sensitivity. I think that you'll be able to know how to behave. And sometimes that can be a problem for Geminis. Geminis just say what's on their mind, and they just perhaps sometimes surprised by the response. But I think today you do know what's going on. And at the same time, your imagination is on good form. I mean, a lot of people's imagination is on good form. It's not just you. But, with Mercury square Neptune, because Mercury makes an exact square to Neptune just before it moves from Gemini to Cancer. And this square to Neptune certainly makes you sensitive. It gives you a powerful imagination. But if you do find yourself engaging in a lot of imaginings, don't take your imagination at face value. Don't be fooled by your imagination. It is just imagination. It's just ideas. There's no guarantee that your ideas are at all practical. I mean, they might be practical, but you're going to have to work on them. So turning imagination into concrete action is a slow process, and it may be a process that is actually impossible, can't be done. Some things just are fantastic, and they need to stay as mere fantasy. So do consider that. Now, I'm not saying that today is not at all practical. I think, Gemini, many of you're going to be thinking about money, because with Mercury and Venus moving into Cancer, that does put an immediate emphasis on your money, how much you're earning, how much you're spending. And security could suddenly become important. I mean, I know Gemini is not supposed to be a security-orientated sign, but I think with Mercury and Venus moving into Cancer, security is going to matter. And I would take that seriously. So consider what you need to give yourself security, and look at perhaps a couple of things that could undermine you. Perhaps you're spending too much money. Perhaps you're not saving enough money. Perhaps you need to sort of reorganize your finances in some way. Again, I have to keep emphasizing this video, these forecasts are for entertainment purposes only. I'm not giving financial advice, but still, it may be worth making things safer. Perhaps something isn't safe, or you haven't fully taken into account certain security concerns. I don't know how those security concerns are working out, whether it's to do with encryption or who's got what key, who has access, all those kind of questions, internet scams. So do take financial security seriously. Maybe unnecessary, but you just don't know, do you? So that is something that you should consider. And I suppose I have to say, there's no need to be too trusting. I mean, what is the point of trusting people if you don't have to? So, if in doubt, don't trust anyone. And, Cancer as a sign has a keen sense of its own security needs. And with Mercury moving into Cancer, I think you feel that. Though there is another side to this, with Mercury conjunct Venus. Venus can be about relationships. And so with Mercury conjunct Venus, there's just something about you that you know how to behave in other people's company, and you know what people want, and you know what people want to hear. And as a result, there are actions you can take to improve the various relationships you're in, and perhaps even to create a new relationship. Cancer. It's starting to be the Cancer season, isn't it? Sorry, Cancer as in the crab. Must emphasize that Cancer astrologically, the crab, has nothing to do with cancer, the disease. It's like with the phobias. If you have cancer phobia, I believe that means you're afraid of crabs. If you're afraid of cancer, I think that's called carcinophobia. I think I've got that right. So when you hear cancer in an astrological context, it is not about cancer, the disease. But there is, from an astrological perspective, this Cancer emphasis is really starting now. Mercury and Venus are moving into Cancer, and in a few days' time, the Sun will be moving into Cancer. Of course, when the Sun moves into Cancer, it's your season, it's your time, and so you are starting to feel more capable, and I think more positive about what you can achieve, and not perhaps being so concerned about other people, whether you've got what it takes, confidence issues. And I think that's right. I think Mercury and Venus moving into Cancer is going to make you more confident and more aware of what you can achieve. And in terms of communication, I think you're going to be able to communicate very well. People will understand you, and I think that it's a great time for showing off and showcasing your various talents. Every Cancerian has got a range of talents. It's actually a very creative sign, Cancer. Julius Caesar, he was a Cancer, wasn't he? I mean, our whole calendar was created by Julius Caesar, the Julian calendar. Of course, it became a Gregorian calendar, but it was all down to Julius Caesar, wasn't it? This shows how creative and intelligent he was. And so, that's you. And I think that you're helped by the fact that the moon is moving into Scorpio. So, moon in Scorpio. Some people are sort of concerned about moon moving into Scorpio because Scorpio has perhaps a bad reputation, and the moon isn't supposed not to work very well in Scorpio. Well, I think there are a few problems with moon in Scorpio, but I think for you, I think the moon in Scorpio is really quite a good placement, because when the moon is in Scorpio, I think you have a greater sense of what you can do and what you can achieve, but a very sort of deep emotional level. And we shouldn't forget that Cancer is a very emotional sign. It's a water sign, and we've got a lot of stuff moving into water signs. We've got Mercury and Venus moving into Cancer. Cancer is a water sign. We've got Moon moving into Scorpio. Scorpio is a water sign. So your imagination and the emotions underlying that imagination really are on great form. Now, the moon, as it moves into Scorpio, does make an opposition to Mars. And that moon opposition Mars is perhaps a reminder that you can't be friends with everyone. And some people, or maybe just one person, is incredibly annoying. Moon opposition Mars can represent a conflict situation, just you and someone else just not seeing eye to eye. And an argument is a very real possibility. So Cancer, I would suggest that you're careful in terms of managing your social life. It might seem a good thing to do, but do you really need to meet people, particularly people who you've had arguments with before, people who set your alarm bells going, who give you a load of red flags? Do you really need to deal with these people? I suspect that the answer is probably no. And so if you can protect yourself from disruptive elements, people who you could have arguments with, then I think it looks like being, a great day when I just think you're going to really be able to benefit from the fact that Venus and Mercury are moving into Cancer. And it's not just a one-day wonder, because Venus and Mercury, they do stay in Cancer for some time. I mean, to give you an idea, Mercury is in Cancer until, Mercury is in Cancer until beginning of July, and Venus is in Cancer until, Mercury is in Cancer till the 2nd of July. Venus is in Cancer until the 11th of July. So the next few weeks, you've got Mercury, Venus in Cancer, and let's not forget the Sun, which is about to go into Cancer. So overall, Cancer, I think that things are looking good. Leo. Things are certainly changing because planets are moving out of Gemini and into Cancer. Mercury and Venus today are moving into Cancer. A few days' time, Sun will be moving into Cancer. Remember, Sun is your ruler. So with planets moving into Cancer, this might mean that at some level you may have to or want to perhaps slow down a little. You perhaps shouldn't feel that there's anything you actually have to do. And I think that, over the next few weeks, you may want to perhaps fade into the background a little. And I think that starts today. You just don't feel it's as important to be in the public eye as you used to feel. Maybe over the last few weeks you felt it's, you have been attracted to social situations and having an active social life, and perhaps that's been important to you. But now, I don't think quite so much. And I think, Leo, in many ways, you're going to be valuing your own company. Though there are going to be times when, of course, you do have to engage. And today there is an opposition aspect between the Moon and Mars. And this opposition between Moon and Mars does push you into the limelight, does make you feel that you want attention. But is this a good thing? I think that if you try too hard to get attention, there might be aggravation. People might respond to you in a way that, could be quite negative. And in certain situations, we may have a conflict situation. Moon opposition Mars. It is a difficult aspect. And I think that you have to be particularly careful if you happen to be working over the day, or you have to do something which requires you to adopt a high profile, because with a high profile comes the risk of upsetting people or you saying something that people disagree with. So I think, Leo, in that sense, you need to be a little careful, and you must always plan your escape routes. escape routes do matter. Wherever you are, think, how are you going to get out of it? If things don't work out, if you're not happy, how are you going to leave? And that is a physical question. And it is also I suppose, a social emotional question. So on a physical level, you have to, you have to see where is the door, what obstacles are between where you are and the door, and what people are in the way, and how you're going to get out of a building, for example. So that's one way. How do you leave? How do you leave is also, how do you tell people you don't want to be there anymore? So have that in your mind. Have preparations there for leaving. If things get difficult, what was that sort of 60s phrase? Was it bad scene cats, let's fade? So it could be a time when the scene gets bad and it's necessary to fade. So when that time comes, you must act quickly, because if you don't fade quick, you may be stuck. So that's the broad picture for today. I don't think it's a great day if you have ideas about being highly sociable. If you're spending a day alone or with people you know and trust, then it should be fine. In fact, I think you can be quietly creative, and I think your imagination is going to be on good form. But if you've got other people around you, or too many people around you, then I think it might be difficult to achieve very much. Virgo. Things are changing. Mercury, for example, is moving out of Gemini into Cancer. And that's important. Mercury is your ruler, and it's done well in Gemini because Mercury rules Gemini. But there is a point where it all becomes too much of a good thing. You've done your bit, Mercury in Gemini. Perhaps you've accomplished quite a lot. Maybe you sorted things out. Maybe you've got your message across. Maybe people understand your ambitions. And so that's all been done. But now there's a change. Mercury switches from Gemini into Cancer. In fact, Venus moves out of Gemini and Cancer as well. Venus moves out of Gemini and into Cancer as well. So what does this mean? I don't think that it's a bad changeover from a Virgo perspective, having Mercury in Cancer. I think that it means that you're becoming more sensitive. You perhaps don't have to say too much, or at least say as much as you used to be saying. And, in dealing with other people, I do feel that you are going to be more sensitive. But also, Virgo, you need to ask yourself, why? What is the point? Why do you want what you want? What are your ambitions? Do these ambitions really mean anything? And you're really being asked to look at things from a broader perspective, to look at the overall plan, where things stand in terms of your life goals. Because I think when you look at the broader perspective, you'll start to realize that simple ambitions like status, power, more money are pretty irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. And instead you need to be focusing on, what are your broad hopes for the future? Maybe looking way ahead, 10 years ahead perhaps. Not talking about how much power you have over the next 5 minutes. So that is something that you need to consider. And while you're making this transition, moving perhaps from sort of questions of ambition to questions about hopes for the future, fears for the future, life goals, there could be just a moment of confusion when you're asking, when you're not quite sure where you're going. And in this moment of confusion, which I think you might feel today, particularly as Mercury is making a square to Neptune, it's not a good time to be making decisions. It's just a moment of vulnerability. So with this moment of vulnerability, I would suggest that you try to relax, take it all in. There's a lot to take in, both mentally and emotionally. Then at a later stage, you will be in a better position to make decisions. Though, from a social perspective, Mercury, your ruler, is conjunct Venus. And that Mercury conjunct Venus is really very fortunate. It does allow you to get on very well with people, and in a way that is not really very Virgoan. I mean, one problem that Virgos can sometimes have is they can focus too much on small details, particularly small social details. And with Mercury and Venus moving into Cancer, I think that you can see the broad picture, and you can emotionally, you're more sensitive than usual, and I think you're going to have a good understanding of what other people like and what they don't like. And so I think that your social skills are going to be very good, and I think that you might get some good feedback about some of your ideas, some of your hopes and your fears for the future. So talk about that and get some feedback. And I think that from an emotional perspective, I think that you and the people close to you really, I think, are going to be broadly on the same wavelength. Libra, you are in a process of change. I mean, a lot of people are in a process of change at the moment. And to be more specific about what is happening to you, Venus is your ruler, and Venus has been in Gemini for some time, and Venus is moving into Cancer. And with Venus's movement into Cancer, I think that you are becoming more focused. With Venus in Gemini, you had lots of ideas, lots of concepts. You could be going in this direction and that direction, and you maybe weren't very focused, but you were perhaps looking at the broad picture. You felt that was more important than focusing on, small details and, what actually you needed to do. But anyway, things have changed now. Venus is in Cancer. And I think that with Venus in Cancer, you're starting to think about what needs to be done in terms of, I suppose, achieving your goals. And perhaps you've got an agenda that you're now aware of. Before, you weren't really aware of your agenda. You had some vague agenda, and maybe the agenda kept changing, but now it's not changing. I think also you're maybe being a little more selfish than usual. That's okay. Putting your own interests first and realizing that the only person that you can really rely on is you yourself. And so that is your approach, and I think you're going to be able to communicate your requirements fairly effectively. And that is because Mercury is making a conjunction to Venus. So, Mercury is a planet of communication. It's conjunct Venus. So you're going to have a fair amount to say, but not too much to say. I think that you will say enough to get heard and to ensure that people really understand what you're trying to achieve. Though some caution may be required, because you might be actually quite hasty. Perhaps because you want things done, perhaps because you're in a hurry, you find yourself being pushed. And if you are hasty, there's some danger that you just get yourself into a difficult situation. things just get out of control very quickly. And also I think you're going to be quite accident prone today. So once you've made this transition, it is about being more ambitious, I think more focused. You have to be careful how you go. If you're too ambitious, too hasty, you want results too quickly, then you could end up losing control. There really isn't such a hurry. You have got time. Indeed, this is at the beginning of something. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's not a huge marathon, but perhaps over the next few weeks, you need to just consider what you're trying to do. And if you can't achieve what you want today or tomorrow, really, it's not a big deal. That's just the beginning. You certainly don't want to exhaust yourself or create needless aggravation. That needless aggravation, yeah, it is possible. But I think if you show some awareness and some self-discipline, I don't think that it need happen. And also, try if possible to make the most of the people around you. I think people are looking for some sense of harmony, and they want a happy, harmonious life, and they don't want conflict, and they want everyone to agree. And I think that is a good thing, provided it's not taken too far. People say that consensus is good, and I think consensus is good up to a point. If you feel that you're not being heard, that you're just trying to compromise and you're trying to be everyone's friend, then something's wrong. Because there does come a point where you have to stand up for yourself. If you feel that you don't agree with what anyone says or what other people are saying, then yeah, you do have to stand up for yourself. That really is important. If you say nothing, then you could get yourself into a lot of trouble. And even if you don't get yourself into a lot of trouble, there is still a moral obligation to be heard and to say what you think. And it may be what you say is not appreciated, but you can still tell yourself that you did what you could. You tried your best to prevent people from getting into a bad situation. But honestly, I think that you're able to communicate very well. I think that if you don't like something, I think that you'll be able to be heard, and I think people will listen to you, and I don't think they're going to be especially offended if you point out the truth to them. And one thing, Libra, that you might be concerned about today could be money, because the moon is moving into Scorpio. The moon has been in Libra for a couple of days, and it was kind of fairly relaxing having a moon in Libra, but now it's moving into Scorpio. Things are a little bit more intense, little bit more complicated, and the financial dimension could rear its head when you least expect it, because the moon is not just in Scorpio, it's opposition Mars. So you've got moon and Mars opposition across the main axis of your solar chart. And so that could represent a few financial issues suddenly appearing. And it may be that other people are involved. Maybe you and someone else have a financial disagreement. But you've got to be heard. You've got to give your opinion about the way money is spent, where it's not being spent, how people are handling their money. You can't just keep it to yourself, and you just can't just get angry about it without really saying anything. You do have to say something. And ideally, things can be discussed in a sort of logical, harmonious way. And I think that can happen because of this conjunction between Mercury and Venus. Mercury and Venus, Mercury is rational, but it's in Cancer. So I think that you're able to talk things through in a way that is emotionally aware, but that is also pretty logical. Scorpio. Well, Scorpio, the moon is moving into your sign, which in some respects is a good thing. You're more comfortable when the moon is in Scorpio. You're feeling in your element. But when the moon moves into Scorpio, it also makes an opposition aspect to Mars. Mars is your ruler. And I think Scorpio, you're going to be very aware of your own independence and also what the limits on your independence might be. I mean, none of us are totally independent. We've all got to take into account other people and other constraints on our freedom of action. And I think you're going to be very aware of all of this. And if you see constraints on your freedom of action, you may get annoyed. But are you right to get annoyed? I think you do need to carefully consider what's going on and not be too emotional about it. There is a lot of emotion flying around today because, Moon's gone into Scorpio, Mercury and Venus have moved from Gemini into Cancer. So we've got 3 planets in water signs that weren't in water signs yesterday. That is a big change. And yes, it might be a time where there's more emotion, where it's more appropriate to be emotional, but there is some danger that you take things too far. So don't fall into that trap. Though perhaps, Scorpio, what you should be doing is using your emotions in a positive way. Yes, emotions can be very damaging if emotions get out of control. But emotions are about sensitivity. Emotions are about understanding who people are, what their likes and dislikes are, what it takes to get on with them, and bringing people together. And yes, that is something that Scorpios can actually do, bring people together. Might not be easy, at least at first, but if you make the effort and you try to find the connections between people, I really think that you can be successful. And I think that you're going to be helped by the fact that there is a conjunction between Mercury and Venus in Cancer. Cancer is a water sign, like Scorpio. And so with that Mercury-Venus conjunction, I think that there is going to be a good interplay of words. People are going to be able to talk, even if they have very different backgrounds. Different backgrounds from yourself, different experiences, but somehow your desire for cooperation and oneness can cut through these differences, and I think you and others will just find the right way of relating. And I think that through the right relationships, everyone can be elevated, including you, of course, and your horizons can be expanded, and I think that you'll have a more positive view about what is possible in the future. And I know that Scorpio sometimes has a reputation for being overly negative, but it's unnecessary. And yeah, sure, I understand the moon is opposition Mars. There are things to get angry about, but I'm just fairly confident that you can actually transcend this anger and perhaps see people as a bonus rather than being a problem. Sagittarius, you do want things to happen. You'd like them to happen now. But the question is, can they happen now? Is that actually possible? It may be, Sagittarius, that you have to be a little patient, especially with the moon moving into Scorpio, because I think that with the moon moving into Scorpio, you are starting to slow down, and Your social skills may not be quite as good as they used to be. Or maybe your priorities are changing. You're not even fully aware that your priorities are changing. You're starting to see the world in a different light, and you're perhaps aware that certain things are just hard work. It's hard work that you don't want to do, but it's at the same time, it's just hard work that just has to be done. And I suppose if you're engaged in hard work, things that have to be done, then your more fun ambitions have to be put on hold. But I think that is okay. And you may find that, yes, you are, to an extent, reliant on other people. But where are they? They're just not quite there. And so there may be a certain sense of solitude today. And a solitude that at first doesn't feel entirely natural. You know, you shouldn't be alone. You shouldn't have to be working things out on your own. It doesn't feel right. At least that's how it starts. But then as you progress through the day, you realize that it's actually quite logical, that there are things that only you can do. You have the inspiration, you have the intuition. It's not other people that have this inspiration and intuition. So it's down to you to make things happen. And in the first instance, if you want to make things happen, I'm afraid that just does involve some hard work. And you know, while all this is going on, I think you may start to realize that some of your activities are actually more complicated than usual. And I think that might be to do with the fact that, you know, planets are moving into water signs. It's not just the moon that's moving into Scorpio. It's the fact that Mercury and Venus are moving into water sign. In other words, they're moving into Cancer. And so things aren't easy, and you can't make assumptions about what other people are thinking and what motivates them. People's motivations may be actually more complicated than you realize. And, you know, if you think that you can get your way by making a simple offer, perhaps a simple exchange or a deal or whatever, it's not possible, or I don't think it's possible, because I think people's priorities and, you know, what they think is important is, you know, it's complicated, it's bound in powerful emotions, and those powerful emotions can't be fully understood. I think you'd like to understand why people have the priorities they have, but I don't think you're going to get there. So perhaps, Sagittarius, today you should just accept things as they are and do things your own way, and just avoid complications, and, you know, particularly avoid social complications. So don't try to push people. Just accept them the way they are. Capricorn. I suppose you have to decide, Capricorn, how far you want to go in terms of, you know, your plans for today. I think you do have plans today, maybe quite a lot of plans, but, you know, some of these plans are maybe not entirely realistic, or there may be the possibility that they get disrupted, particularly if you take on too much. If you try to do too much, then the possibility of disruption starts to increase. Though, where does this disruption come from? I mean, I think, Capricorn, in some respects, you are quite ambitious and you want things to happen, and you are actually quite impatient. You know, I know that Capricorn has not got a reputation for being an impatient sign, but I think you are pretty impatient right now. There are things annoying you, and you want to make things happen. and you perhaps want to create some kind of grand transformation. I think you can actually achieve it in many cases, but the question is, what is the price? Are you going to upset too many people in the process? So you do have to bear that in mind. And if you want to get your way, it might be a good idea to do a little bit of listening. Remember, Mercury and Venus are changing sign today. They're moving into Cancer, which is your opposite sign. You know, Mercury is the planet of communication. Venus is the planet of relating. They're moving into your opposite sign. It's about you perhaps having to respond rather than act. See how people are responding. See what people like and what they don't like. Then you'll be in a better position to be able to make your opinions felt. You have to work with the social environment you've got, and you can't expect people to just do things your way. You have to assume that they're going to want to do things their way, and you have to work with that. You can't change the tide. I suppose from a social perspective, it's like Canute. You can't, if the tide's coming, it doesn't matter how powerful you are, you can't make the tide go out again. It's coming in. And so that's like just having to accept the social tides, not going against them, but instead going with them. And if you can go with the social tides, going with public opinion, or maybe not public opinion, but generally the opinions of the people around you, going with it up to a point, then maybe you'll have some chance of, maybe mediating things a little, just shifting opinions, but never changing opinions. It's all about shifting. And in that way, you have to be very subtle, and you should never get to a situation where you are in a conflict, where someone says one thing, you say another thing, you're wrong, I'm right, that kind of thing. When you get to that stage, you've failed. So do be subtle, Capricorn. I think that is the best way of having a useful day. Aquarius, you are starting to think about what you want and how you want it. And you're not particularly in the mood for compromise. You want it done your way, and you've got this idea in your head. This is how it should be done. And it's made more powerful by the fact that the moon is making a square aspect to Pluto. So moon is in Scorpio. Very intense, focused position, moon being in Scorpio. Pluto is in Aquarius. It's in your sign. So moon square Pluto, there are things you want. Okay, you might not want them now, but you want them pretty soon. And I think, Aquarius, if you are very focused on what you want, on your goals, certainly your short-term goals, I'm fairly confident that you're going to be successful. Because I don't think anyone's really going to want to stand in your way. It's just too much effort. But if you are in the mood for pushing your agenda, I do think that you are going to have to be a little prepared. I mean, you need to sort yourself out. You need to make sure that everything is in order. You need to make sure that all your lines of communication are clear, and that maybe, I'm not the one really to talk about presentation. Presentation isn't really my thing. But for some Aquarians, presentation may actually be very important. Putting effort into the way you look could matter. Putting effort even into the way you speak. I don't know, I'm not suggesting you have elocution lessons or anything like that, but just the way the words come out is just important in terms of getting your way. So, do consider that. And I know that's probably not something Aquarians want to hear, because Aquarians, they like to be detached. They don't like to be the slave to, I don't know, fashion, style, other people's tastes. And, I'd certainly agree with that. But just maybe today it is important. As I said, I'm not someone to talk about that. But it just could be important. And I do think that is something that you maybe need to bear in mind. Aside from that, well, the only thing I would say that if you happen to be spending a lot of time in your own home or with your family, be a little careful, because there is some danger of maybe disruption, or maybe some kind of argument, an argument that is really quite unnecessary. And it may be an argument about an organizational matter. You have an idea about the way things should be organized. Someone else has their own ideas, and that could be a problem. It could be a very mundane issue. Something like how you fill a dishwasher, for example. That could be a cause of an argument. Where something is placed, where it's not placed. So from your perspective, don't get too obsessed about it. It's just not worth it. If someone wants something done in a particular way and it's not a crucial life and death matter, and it's not crucial to your core identity, then probably it's best to just do things their way and just and not get yourself into trouble and just move on to something else. Pisces. Moon is now in Scorpio, moving into Scorpio. Okay, it might be moving into Scorpio tomorrow if you're in Australia, New Zealand, but by and large, Moon is moving into Scorpio. Also, Mercury and Venus are moving into Cancer. So we've got planets moving into water signs. And if you look at it from a Piscean perspective, that's really pretty good, because Pisces is a water sign, so we sort of get this grand trine feel. Moon in Scorpio, trine Mercury and Venus in Cancer, trine Pisces. Okay, there's no planets in early Pisces. Sure, we've got Saturn and Neptune in late Pisces, but not mid-late Pisces. But we don't have anything in early Pisces. But there is still this grand trine feel about it. And so with all this water, and you being a water sign, I think that there is a sense that we have some movement, that you have movement, that emotionally things are starting to work, whereas in the past they weren't working. Things might have felt a bit stuck. You may even thought there was just a bit too much talking with all that stuff in Gemini, but that's all over. And I think that as a sensitive Piscean, you can really feel the way things are going. And I think that you actually have the opportunity to have quite a powerful influence on your social environment, for example. I think people are going to listen to you. And if you have ideas about how people can cooperate, how people can form unions, how they can, when I say form unions, I don't know, I'm not really talking about trade unions. I'm talking about unions between people, but who knows? I suppose if you happen to be a union activist, it might actually be a good day. But you can create connections between people. It's going to be relatively easy, and all you have to do is just be assertive about it, saying we need to form this connection between you and you, and I think you'll be able to form the connection. So if you find yourself in a situation where people are disagreeing with each other, then I think you can make some changes here. and I think you can be a great force for good. And I should really mention your abilities. Pisces is a very sensitive, imaginative sign, and we have got a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Cancer, and that Mercury-Venus conjunction in Cancer sort of makes a trine aspect kind of to Pisces, your sign. I mean, from a Piscean perspective, Cancer is a sign that's very connected with enjoyment and creativity. So that Mercury-Venus conjunction is going to allow you to enjoy people's company, but on your terms. But it's also going to highlight your own ability to do things that are really special. I said you are a talented person. You've got so many things to offer. And I think with that Mercury-Venus conjunction, you'll be able to really bring your core abilities really out into the open in a way that people can appreciate. But don't worry if you don't get appreciation. That's not the point. It's about doing something that you know is good and is worthwhile. And, I know we're always told that we're in a social environment, that without other people we're nothing. But in this sense, at least in the short term, you're the best judge of what you can do. Don't let other people's judgment cloud your mind. You know it best. Okay, you might be subjective, but I think right now you've got a good understanding of yourself and what you can do and what you can't do, and I think you really should make the most of that. Okay, those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and I'm now going to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like from a perspective of those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 50, the cauldron. So here we are. There is the cauldron. So, we have the principle of the cauldron here. And, we've got a pot. And it's not just any pot. It's a fairly sacrificial thing. It's perhaps got sort of connotations of ritual. And it's got some ritual purpose and religious purpose. So it is something special, but it does contain important things. You could say that it contains everything that we are in terms of everything that we have got to contribute. And it's just so important that we make the most of everything we've got, particularly today when there is a Mercury-Venus conjunction. It's a very fortunate conjunction. This Mercury-Venus conjunction is about taking our abilities and being able to communicate them, and getting people to understand and hopefully admire and appreciate what we've got. But it can be a bit of a problem. I think the problem is that if you imagine a cauldron it's on fire. It's hot. It's really hot. You can't just pick it up. You're gonna burn yourself. And this cauldron has got some broken handles. Broken handles because the third line moves. And so if you've got broken handles, you can't pick it up. And so in the beginning, we are faced with a situation where all our abilities and talents, they're all there. all our skills, all the things we do so well, but we just don't have access to them. I don't know. I haven't played bridge for a long time. It's like you've got a brilliant hand. I don't know if you've ever played bridge, but it's like you've got this great hand. It's, for example, you might have all spades, but it's being played in diamonds, and your spades never appear. They just never. The other side has got the initiative, and every trick is diamonds, and your spades just disappear, and you can never use them, even if you've got 13 spades. But if the whole hand is being played in diamonds, you can never use it, and that is just really sad. And so it's maybe a similar picture here, that you just don't have access to it. So what do you do? Well, the problem is you don't have any handles. It's just too hot to pick up. And, what that means is, there is a recognition issue. I mean, I think that many of us may feel that we are not being properly recognized. And, we just can't express ourselves in a way we would like to express ourselves. But the I Ching tells us that it's a temporary problem. The handles can be fixed. So what we have to do is not focus on what we can do, but how we are presenting ourselves and how we actually get access to the cauldron where everything that we are it lies. And so that's something we really need to do today. And the suggestion is that it really can be done. And, we have the third line from the bottom moves, generally an unfortunate line, and that's talking about the problem with the handles, problem about not getting enough support. And this hexagram, it moves to hexagram 64, which is before completion. So, similar picture. We've got it all. We've got everything in order. We've got everything that we are. It's all in the cauldron. But can we see it through? Can we see it through to the point where we can get the recognition we deserve, where we can actually achieve what we need to achieve? We've done our learning, we've got our experience, but can we actually cross to the other side? And that's what before completion is all about. It's about crossing to the other side. And we're almost there. We've got access to everything that we are, everything we're good at, but we haven't quite reached the other side of the river. And there is a danger here. We're crossing a river. We could get dragged down. We just might run out of steam before we get to the other side. So what we've got to do in that last bit, we're so close to the other side, we just got to be very careful. We mustn't assume we've made it until we've actually got there. We've got to be persistent, and we've got to understand our weaknesses, but we also need that vision to get us across to the far bank. And with that vision, and with that determination, but also with that caution, because, it's all about making a mistake at the last moment. The I Ching likes to use this image of a fox getting its tail wet. I suppose fox gets its tail wet, gets dragged down. That's one view. Or a fox crossing ice, and it mustn't make mistakes. We mustn't make mistakes. And if we can do that, we can indeed get to the other side of the river, and we'll have everything in order, and we will have made it. So that's it. That's the I Ching. And I am now going to look at Princess Catherine. I'm not feeling, wonderfully inspired by this topic, but I noticed that she was getting a lot of attention in the news. I talked about her in the past, and I suppose one might be thinking, well, what is going on? for example, this trooping of the colour. It just sounds really boring to me, really boring. Why would anyone want to look at that kind of thing? All those sort of military marches and Buckingham Palace and that thing. It's never really appealed to me. But still, it was her first public appearance. So, what was it about? So let's look at some charts relating to Princess Catherine. Now, the trooping of the colour, apparently, it started at 10:30 a.m. Apparently that's when the first ceremonies started. I mean, I've looked at other sources. Some people were saying 11, but as far as I could see, it was 10:30. Now, if that time is true, then we are, that would certainly make sense, because Regulus is rising. 29, 27 Leo rising. Regulus is the royal star, so it's a royal event. And we have got Uranus on the midheaven. I suppose you could say there's a lot of attention to the thing. A lot of focus. Princess Catherine is in the limelight. That could be Uranus on the midheaven. I mean, as far as I see, nothing bad happened. It just went on as normal. But what did Catherine actually feel about it? Which makes me think about what was going on in her chart. So here is her chart. She's born January the 9th, 1982 at 7 p.m. And I've looked at her chart quite a lot. I mean, my general feeling about her chart is that, where she should be going and what she should be doing is, I just feel that all this royal attention and being in the limelight is just not good for her. Not good for her at all. She's got the moon in Cancer, conjunct the North Node in the 12th house. Moon in Cancer needs to be nurtured in the 12th house. Doesn't like the public eye. I don't think it's not even her destiny, the public eye. I don't think that's where she should be heading. I don't think, I know that people are saying really excited that people see her at the trooping of the colour. Should we be happy for her? Well, obviously, if she's feeling better, we should be happy for her. But in terms of it being a progressive thing for her to be doing, I'm not convinced. She should be away from a public eye for, let her get completely well. Let wait years. Maybe she should be focusing on something else. And of course, her South Node is conjunct the Sun in Capricorn, doing her duty. There we go, South. And so this perhaps is what we're seeing is something of a South Node event. And so, that's her chart. Notice also her Chiron her Chiron on the midheaven. I mean, it's not on her midheaven. Okay, it's quite a way off her midheaven, but if you were using an equal house system, the Chiron will be pretty close to the cusp of the 10th, and it's square the ascendant. So Chiron, you can say, is elevated, and that's her wound, I think, having to be in the public eye. I think that must really hurt, having to be in the public eye. I mean, she may not feel that it hurts to begin with, but I think it does grind her down. And I don't know. I mean, with her particular illness and cancer. I mean, normally they say with cancer, it's something genetic, and it's one doesn't want to exaggerate the psychological elements to cancer, but still, it can't have helped the fact that she was in the public eye, and this isn't really, in my opinion, it's just not her destiny. She should have been focusing on her moon in Cancer in the 12th house, conjunct the South Node. Now, looking at the transits she was having at the time of this event, the newspapers excited that she's there. She's her first public appearance. But how does she feel about it? Well, a short-term transit that we do have to take into account is Mars. Mars was on her midheaven. Now you could say Mars on a midheaven. Oh, that's good. Mars is very energizing on the midheaven. But, it's Mars in Taurus. Mars is in its detriment in Taurus. I think that at some level she probably regarded the thing as being just a bit of a pain, I would have said. I don't feel whatever she looked like, however sort of happy she was or appeared, I think that Mars conjunct the midheaven perhaps is something of an irritation for her. And so that was really the main transit. Now that Mars, she has in her chart a Mercury-Venus conjunction, Mercury-Venus in Aquarius. So Mars is on the midheaven, applying to a square of that Mercury-Venus conjunction. Now, that Mercury-Venus conjunction in Aquarius, as I've suggested already, but Mercury-Venus as a conjunction it's really very talented. It's as a pair, it's artistic, it's creative. It may also say something about her intelligence. As far as I know, she is an intelligent woman. I suspect she's more intelligent than her husband, but she may be sensitive to the Mercury-Venus cycle. So it's kind of interesting that at the time she makes this first public appearance, there's Mercury and Venus. There's a Mercury-Venus conjunction, which are about 2 degrees apart. So she may be sensitive to Mercury and Venus. So it's kind of not surprising that she makes a public appearance when Mercury and Venus are conjunction in the sky, because she's used to that energy, because she has Mercury-Venus herself in her chart. But still, Mars is aspecting at Mercury-Venus, which is something of an irritation. And also that Mercury-Venus conjunction is in the 6th house. 6th house is connected with health, and it just strikes me as being just a little bit of a pain. I just feel that left to her own devices, this is perhaps not something that she would actually want to do. Now, turning to the lunar return. Now, lunar returns, I could be looking at solar returns. let's just look at her solar return very quickly. So her solar return started when she, I suppose was the beginning of the year. That's when she, when she disappeared, when we found out she was very ill. And so her solar return for 2024, which, I don't want to make a completely big deal about this solar return. This solar return is perhaps not as dramatic as one might have expected for such a traumatic thing to happen to her. Except, you could say, Mercury was square Neptune at the time of her solar return. And that's kind of interesting. So she had a Mercury-Neptune at the time of her solar return, and she had Moon square Neptune in her solar return. And of course, she trooping of the colour, Mercury was square Neptune when she reappeared, when she did this public appearance. So that is perhaps of some interest. But yeah, I don't find the solar return especially dramatic. We might say that, the Sun and Mars midpoint is on the IC. So that's perhaps an aggravating factor. Though her converse solar return is probably more interesting. Oh, by the way, in her solar return, she's got Jupiter on the 8th house cusp in Taurus. And of course, 6 months later or so, when she made this appearance at the Trooping of the Colour, Mars was conjunct with the Jupiter of the solar return. But turning to her converse solar return, remember her main solar return is, she's born in 1982. So that's 42 years after she was born. So we go 42 years before she was born. So she's born in 1982. So we go to her solar return for 1940. So there's her solar return for 1940. And her solar return for 1940, which of course is the solar return for her converse solar return, which is basically talking about this year because it represents her year following her 42nd birthday. That's perhaps more telling than the direct solar return, because we have got, for a start, we've got Moon opposition Pluto. Moon opposition Pluto can be about disappearance. It can be about something really quite difficult. And we've got Sun square Saturn, perhaps Mars conjunct Jupiter. Mars conjunct Jupiter is in Aries, just putting a lot of energy into something. It's quite an exhausting solar return. And then you've got Neptune. Neptune is at 25 Virgo on January the 10th, 1940, so that Neptune is square her ascendant. And so her ascendant is who she is, how she comes over to the public. And Neptune in this is making her disappear, all these questions about what's wrong with her, what's going on. And I think that Neptune square the ascendant does seem to be working out. And then we should perhaps consider her lunar return before her public appearance, before the Trooping of the Colour. So lunar return. So this is her lunar return for. So this is June the 8th. This is about a week before it happened. And I think that this lunar return seems to indicate that, to me, that it wasn't much fun for her. Maybe wrong on this. But Uranus is on the IC on the lunar return. It's quite a disruptive, difficult influence having Uranus on the IC at a time of a lunar return. And the moon, that's what this lunar return is all about. She has the moon at 18 degrees Cancer, so it's hitting, yeah, so it is hitting her. It's on her descendant. It's not really where you want it to be, the moon on the descendant. It's strong on it's certainly strong on the descendant, but when you've got the moon on the descendant and you've got Uranus on the IC, that is, I think, it's talking about the pressure that is on her. And remember, that moon is in her natal chart is conjunct the North Node. It should be where she wants to be. She wants to be somewhere else. And I do think that the lunar return, which is, it's only a chart that lasts for 1 month. Every month you get a new lunar return. But I do think that lunar return could be creating a few issues for her. One set of transits I also want to look at is her converse transits. I looked at her direct transits. So converse transits would be for you take the time between her birth and when she has to turn up to the Trooping of the Colour. You take that time and then you move it backwards. So converse transit would be, so we set the transit for August the 6th, 1939. So if you go back the other way, and I think this converse transit is quite telling, particularly if it's been done accurately. I assume the software has worked it out accurately, and we really can say that Mars is rising and Pluto is close to the descendant. So that does seem to me to be a little difficult, really. So if we actually look at, and also another thing about the converse transit, if you take that exact time that from her birth to the trooping of the colour, then you take it backwards, exactly same time, you find there's a Saturn-Pluto square, a pretty close Saturn-Pluto square. And so Saturn-Pluto does represent the pressure she's under. It's a huge amount of pressure at the moment. And, I really think it was just unreasonable, in my opinion. I think, obviously, she having South Node on the Sun, conjunct the Sun in Capricorn, she probably felt she had to give in to that pressure. But that Saturn-Pluto square, which happened 42 and a half years or so before she was born, on August 6, 1939, I don't know, I just suspect it could be quite undermining. We'll never know the answer, I suppose. We'll never know how she's really feeling. And I want to just finish by looking at her solar arc direction. So solar arc directions, remember, you move everything by 1 degree for 1 year. So here are her solar arc directions for June 15, 2024. So we move everything forward approximately 42 or 43 degrees, and then we compare it to her natal chart. And one thing that she does have in her natal chart, really probably the most important thing, one of the most important things that Catherine has in her natal chart is this T-square involving the Sun and the Moon. Remember, she was born on a full moon eclipse, and it's square Saturn, and I just think, it's just such a difficult square, and I do really feel that she should not be in the public eye at all. I don't think she thrives in the public eye. I mean, people may think she thrives. I think maybe she finds it easy to be in the public eye. South Node conjunct the Sun in Capricorn. Sun is a line of least resistance, but it does take its toll. And if we solar arc direct this Saturn, so we move this Saturn 42 degrees, this Saturn comes up to Uranus. So you can see her solar arc directed Moon is applying to a square of her Uranus. Her solar arc directed Sun is applying to a square of her Uranus. Her solar arc directed Saturn has already made the conjunction of Uranus. So I think that solar arc directed T-square, which is now hitting her Uranus, I think it's an ongoing direction, and she's got Uranus in the 4th. This really should be a time where she starts to perhaps realize what she can do and what she can't do. And in general, I do think that from a node point of view, I just think all of these charts and what we're looking at, I just think it reinforces the message that somehow she's doing the wrong thing, and it's just so difficult. It must be so difficult for her so difficult for her to stand up to the pressure. Maybe she's not even fully aware of it, because that South Node conjunct the Sun in Capricorn just may be a very, very strong impulse, and she just can't quite resist it. It's just a shame, but I think she just somehow needs to get into her Moon conjunct Cancer in conjunct the North Node, and hopefully she'll see the light. Maybe she does see the light, but it doesn't look entirely easy. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I've probably gone on for too long. and perhaps overdone it with the detail. And I haven't really come to any particularly dramatic conclusions. But still, I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you are not subscribed and you enjoyed the video, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.